Melania tried to belittle Jasmine Crockett with polished smiles and quiet mockery, but moments later, Jasmine Crockett flipped the script, exposed the power game in plain sight, and left the audience staring in shock at a truth they couldn't unsee. America didn't feel steady anymore. Trust was thin, patience even thinner, and every conversation, at work, at home, online, felt like it could turn into an argument at any second. Folks were done with polished talk and perfect smiles. They wanted something real, or at least someone brave enough to admit things weren't working the way they were supposed to. That's why this event pulled so many eyes. On paper, it was sold as a calm conversation about leadership and unity. But no one watching believed that for a second. This wasn't about unity. It was about image, about who looked like power and who actually carried it. Everyone tuning in understood the truth. This stage wasn't built to heal anything. It was built to test someone. The room itself felt split before a word was spoken. This wasn't just another public discussion. It felt like something that could tip, one way or the other, depending on who lost control first. Then Melania Trump stepped out, calm, composed, every movement measured, like nothing in the world could touch her unless she allowed it. Her power didn't come from what she said. It came from who she stood beside, from the name that followed her everywhere. The applause was polite, controlled, almost careful, like people weren't sure how loud they were allowed to be. Moments later, Jasmine Crockett walked onto the same stage, and the energy changed. Not polished, not stiff, just direct. She didn't wait for the room to accept her. She filled it. The applause came louder this time, rougher, more honest. You could tell some people were rooting for her, not because she was perfect, but because she felt familiar. Like someone who knew what it was like to be talked down to and still stand their ground. Melania took the first turn, and she did it the way everyone expected. Her voice was soft, steady, almost soothing. She talked about dignity, about how leaders should carry themselves, about calm in a chaotic world. Nothing sharp, nothing obvious. Every word sounded clean and reasonable, the kind of language that feels safe and hard to argue with. But beneath that smooth delivery, there was a message hiding in plain sight. Respect, she suggested, isn't automatic. It's earned by knowing how to behave, how to present yourself, how to fit the image people expect from someone in power. She never said Jasmine's name in that moment, never pointed a finger. She didn't have to. The implication did the work for her. Jasmine didn't respond. She sat still, hands folded, eyes forward, listening. To some in the room, it looked like hesitation. To others, it looked like restraint. The camera lingered on her face just long enough for viewers to wonder if she was being boxed in before she even spoke. Meanwhile, Melania controlled the pace. She paused when she wanted, smiled when it helped, and kept the room right where she wanted it. The audience nodded along, some quietly agreeing, others just following the rhythm she set. Melania let a few seconds pass, just long enough for the room to relax. Then she leaned in slightly and changed the temperature. Her voice stayed smooth, almost polite, but the words carried a chill. "Congresswoman," she said, eyes locked on Jasmine, "are you really who you claim to be?" A pause. "And can you honestly represent the people with that background?" She didn't rush it. She let the question hang there, like a stain everyone could see but no one wanted to touch. You could feel the air leave the room. A few heads turned, someone in the front row stiffened. This wasn't curiosity. It was a challenge dressed up as manners. The message underneath was clear. You don't look the part, you don't come from the right place, and maybe you don't belong here. Melania followed it with a faint, controlled smile, adding quietly, "Leadership requires a certain standard, a certain discipline. Not everyone understands that." It sounded clean. It sounded reasonable. But it cut deep. The cameras caught everything. The slight tilt of Melania's head, the way she crossed her legs, settled back, like she'd already made her point. This was an image attack, not a debate. She wasn't questioning Jasmine's ideas. She was questioning her worth. In that moment, Melania believed she'd forced Jasmine into a corner where any response would look defensive, emotional, or small. The room stayed frozen, waiting for Jasmine to explain herself, to apologize for existing in the wrong skin, the wrong story. Whispers rippled through the audience, low and uneasy. Some faces showed approval, others discomfort, but no one spoke up. Melania pressed once more, soft but sharp. "People deserve representatives who reflect stability," she said. "Not anger, not chaos." It was a clean hit, carefully aimed, meant to frame Jasmine as reckless before she ever opened her mouth. Melania sat back again, confident, convinced she'd just taken control of the night, and that Jasmine Crockett had no choice but to defend herself. Jasmine didn't say a word, not a single sound. She didn't rush to defend herself, didn't smile to soften the blow, didn't play the role Melania had clearly prepared for. She just sat there, calm, steady, looking straight ahead. 5 seconds passed, then 10. The silence stretched so long it started to feel uncomfortable, like a held breath no one could release. The audience shifted in their seats. Someone coughed and immediately stopped, as if embarrassed for breaking the tension. The host glanced down at his notes, then back up, unsure whether to interrupt or let it play out. At home, viewers leaned closer to their screens. This wasn't dead air. This was pressure building, thick and heavy, the kind that makes people nervous because they don't know who's really in control. Melania took the silence as confirmation. She lifted her chin slightly and continued, her voice still calm but firmer now. "Grace," she said slowly, as if defining it for a child. "Grace is knowing how to behave under pressure." She paused, eyes flicking briefly toward Jasmine. "Discipline is knowing when not to react." A faint smile touched her lips. "And leadership means understanding your place in the order of things." The words sounded polished, but the meaning underneath was sharp and ugly. Know your place. Stay quiet. Don't reach for what isn't meant for you. Melania leaned back, crossing her arms lightly. "Some people mistake noise for strength," she added, her tone smooth but dismissive. "But shouting doesn't make you a leader. Control does." A few murmurs rippled through the room. Some nodded. Others stiffened. She kept going, pressing harder now that she thought Jasmine was cornered. "America needs stability," Melania said. "Not anger dressed up as passion. Not chaos pretending to be courage." The jab was clear. This wasn't about ideas anymore. It was character assassination done with a smile, painting Jasmine as reckless, emotional, unfit, without ever raising her voice. But through all of it, Jasmine didn't move. Her face didn't tighten. Her eyes didn't drop. And that's when the silence changed. What had first looked like hesitation now felt deliberate, calculated, dangerous. Melania was talking more, explaining more, revealing more about how she judged power and who she believed deserved it. By the time Melania finished her lecture and settled back into her chair, convinced she had exposed Jasmine without resistance, the room felt different. The tension wasn't aimed at Jasmine anymore. It was turning, slowly, quietly, toward Melania. Jasmine finally moved. Slowly. No sigh, no eye roll, no rush to speak. She lifted the microphone with the same calm she'd held the entire time, and looked straight ahead. Not just at Melania, but past her, toward the room. "Let me be clear," she said evenly. "Silence doesn't mean leadership. She paused just long enough for the words to settle. And politeness isn't the same thing as courage. There was no defense in her voice, no explanation of her past, no apology for where she came from. She didn't try to make herself smaller to fit the frame Melania had built. Sometimes, Jasmine continued, silence is just comfort. And comfort is easy when you've never had to fight to be heard. A few heads snapped up. Someone in the audience whispered, "Wow," under their breath. She leaned forward slightly, still calm, still controlled. "Real leadership," she said, "is speaking up when staying quiet would be easier. It's telling the truth, even when it makes powerful people uncomfortable." Her tone wasn't sharp. That's what made it sting. She wasn't accusing. She was defining, and in doing so, she was quietly stripping Melania's argument of its shine. The room reacted before Melania could. A few claps started, scattered at first, unsure. Then more followed, not loud yet, but real. You could feel the shift, like weight moving across the floor. Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't look for approval. She just let the moment breathe, confident in the words she'd already put out there. Melania tried to jump in. "That's not what she began, her voice suddenly sharper than before. Jasmine didn't raise her voice, didn't even turn fully toward her. She finished her thought anyway. "Grace without honesty is just performance," she said. That was it. Melania cut herself off, lips tightening, fingers tapping the armrest. Melania leaned forward again, clearly unsettled by the shift, and tightened her grip on the moment. Her voice stayed composed, but the warmth was gone. "Leadership," she said firmly, "is built on loyalty." She spoke of order, of structure, of respect for boundaries that should never be crossed. "A country survives when people understand limits," she added, "when they don't confuse disruption with strength." The message was unmistakable. Know the rules. Stay inside them. Don't reach above your station. She kept pressing. Loyalty to institutions. Loyalty to tradition. Loyalty to those already in charge. Crossing lines, she warned, only leads to chaos. It sounded like wisdom, but it carried a warning underneath. Those who challenge the system are the problem. A few people nodded out of habit, but the room didn't feel settled anymore. The confidence Melania relied on was starting to sound defensive. Jasmine answered without raising her voice. "Courage," she said calmly, "is standing up when you're told to stay quiet." She didn't look angry. She didn't sound emotional. "If order means ignoring suffering," she continued, "then order isn't leadership. It's avoidance." The words landed clean and sharp, cutting through the room without noise. That's when the applause broke out. Not polite, not cautious, real. It started from one side of the room, then spread fast, like people had been waiting for permission to react. Jasmine didn't pause to enjoy it. She didn't nod or smile. She just let the truth sit where it belonged, out in the open. Melania's expression tightened, her jaw set. She shifted in her chair, glancing briefly toward the host as if expecting backup. But it didn't come. The energy on stage had changed. The crowd wasn't leaning toward image anymore. They were leaning toward reality. Jasmine let the applause fade on its own, then shifted just enough to signal a turn. Her voice stayed even, almost conversational. "If we're really talking about identity," she said, eyes steady, "about who people are and what they represent, then we should be honest about how power actually works." She didn't raise her volume. She didn't lean in aggressively. The calm made the room uneasy, because it felt like she was opening a door no one wanted opened. She paused, just long enough to make the silence bite again. Then she asked it, clean, quiet, unmistakable. "So tell me," Jasmine said, looking straight at Melania, "who actually stands next to power? You or Ivanka?" Gasps rippled through the hall. A few people covered their mouths. It wasn't a joke, and it wasn't shouted. It landed like a blade drawn slowly, deliberately, with nowhere to hide. For the first time all night, Melania's mask slipped. Her smile froze, then cracked for half a second too long. Her jaw tightened. She blinked, once, hard, as if recalculating in real time. "That's inappropriate," she said quickly, her tone sharper than before, the Polish thinning. "You're crossing a line." The room had felt it, the shift, the exposure, the question that didn't accuse yet somehow revealed everything. Melania hadn't been attacked. She'd been seen. Melania's composure didn't shatter all at once. It fractured. Her posture stiffened, her voice lifting just enough for everyone to notice. "I don't need lessons on power," she said, sharper now, the calm polish slipping at the edges. "I am the wife of the President of the United States." She repeated it, slower the second time, like a shield. "I've stood beside power longer than most people here have even imagined it." The words came faster after that. She talked about sacrifice, about loyalty, about what it meant to live under constant scrutiny. Her accent thickened as emotion crept in, and for the first time she wasn't guiding the room, she was pushing back against it. "People think they know my life," she snapped. "They don't." The confidence was still there, but now it felt defensive, like someone trying to hold a door shut with sheer will. Jasmine didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. She waited until Melania ran out of momentum, then leaned forward just slightly. Her voice stayed low, almost gentle. "Then why," she asked, "do you need to prove it so badly?" That was it. No follow-up, no lecture, just the question. The room stopped breathing. You could hear the hum of the lights, the faint buzz of the microphones. Melania opened her mouth, then closed it. For a split second, she looked exposed, like someone who'd been seen from an angle they didn't know existed. In that silence, everyone understood what had just happened. The argument hadn't cracked Melania. The truth had. Melania broke the silence by standing up. Not slowly, not with grace, just abruptly, like someone trying to regain control by changing the picture. Her chair scraped softly against the floor, the sound sharp in a room that had gone completely still. She straightened her coat, lifted her chin, and said in a low, tight voice, "Be careful what you turn into a spectacle. Truth has a way of coming back." It wasn't a clear threat. It didn't need to be. Everyone understood what she was trying to say. No one clapped. Not a single person. The silence was heavier than any reaction could have been. The host looked frozen, unsure whether to step in or step back. Melania waited for half a second, as if expecting the room to rescue her with applause or respect. But it didn't come. The air offered her nothing. She turned and walked toward the edge of the stage. The cameras followed immediately, catching every step, every tight movement, every forced breath. Her posture was still upright, still elegant, but the confidence that once filled the room was gone. This wasn't a controlled exit. It was a retreat. As she disappeared off stage, the silence stayed behind. No cheers, no boos, just the quiet weight of a moment that couldn't be fixed. The audience didn't need commentary to understand what they'd just seen. Power hadn't been challenged loudly. It had simply stood up and walked away, exposed, with nowhere left to stand. Jasmine didn't move right away. She didn't smile. She didn't look relieved or victorious. She stayed seated for a moment, letting the silence settle, letting the weight of what had just happened sit with the room. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, almost reflective. "This isn't about winning," she said, "and it's not about embarrassing anyone." The words landed softly, but they carried authority. She stood then, not to claim the stage, but to meet it. "Real power," Jasmine continued, "isn't about who looks the part. It isn't about titles, or last names, or standing next to someone important." She looked out across the audience, not searching for approval, just speaking plainly. Power is telling the truth when it costs you something, especially when it would be easier to stay quiet. People began to rise from their seats, not all at once, not in celebration, but slowly, almost instinctively. This wasn't applause fueled by drama or humiliation. It was recognition. Jasmine wasn't attacking Melania. She wasn't even talking about her anymore. She was talking about something bigger, about how image had replaced honesty, and how too many people had been taught to confuse silence with strength. The clapping grew louder, steadier, filling the room. Some people nodded to themselves. Others wiped their eyes. They weren't standing because they'd just watched someone lose. They were standing because they'd seen themselves reflected on that stage. Tired of pretending, tired of being told to stay in line, tired of power that only worked from a distance. Jasmine let the moment pass without comment, understanding something important. When people stand like that, it isn't for you. It's because they finally feel seen. The applause eventually faded, but the feeling didn't. Jasmine waited until the room settled again, until people were back in their seats, but still leaning forward, still listening. She didn't rush to fill the quiet. She knew this part mattered. Then she turned slightly and looked straight into the camera, not at the audience in the room, but at the millions watching from their living rooms. This conversation isn't really about two people on a stage, she said calmly. It's about power. Her tone wasn't sharp or emotional. It was measured, almost personal. Not the kind you see on television, not the kind that comes with titles and photo ops. She paused, letting the words sink in. Then she asked the question, simple and direct. So, ask yourself, who actually controls it? She didn't explain. She didn't point fingers. She didn't offer an answer or a conclusion. She just held the gaze, letting the silence do the work. The room stayed quiet, but you could feel the tension shift outward, beyond the walls, beyond the stage. It wasn't a question meant to be solved in that moment. It was one meant to follow people home, to echo in their heads long after the lights went out. Jasmine stepped back from the microphone without another word, leaving the question hanging. Unfinished, unavoidable, and impossible to ignore. The night didn't end when the lights dimmed. It carried on in phones buzzing, clips replaying, arguments breaking out in comment sections and living rooms across the country. People didn't argue about policy. They argued about what they felt, about that silence, about that question, about the moment power stood up and walked away without a word. News panels replayed the exchange again and again, freezing frames, dissecting tone, asking who crossed a line and who exposed one. Social media split into camps, but something unusual happened. People from opposite sides were sharing the same clip, for different reasons, and watching it all the way through. Not because it was loud, because it was calm, because it didn't beg for attention. It took it. What lingered wasn't anger, it was discomfort, the kind that sticks because it feels familiar. People recognized the pattern. Image over truth, silence over honesty, control over courage. And for once, they'd seen that pattern crack in real time. Not with shouting, not with insults, but with restraint. That's what stayed. The reminder that power doesn't always raise its voice, that truth doesn't need polish or stage lighting to land, and that sometimes all it takes to bring down a carefully built image is one steady voice, refusing to play the role it was given. The echo of that moment didn't fade. It settled in. And once it did, there was no way to unhear it. If this moment made you stop and think, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel for more real conversations, real confrontations, and the moments power doesn't want you to see.